and fire proceedings this evening. So if the fire alarm goes off, then can we stick to our standard procedures, which is usually out the door, down the stairs and out to the car park, basically. Do we have any apologies or changes of membership apart from we have Councillor Stewart standing in for Councillor Lilly, and Councillor Critchison has moved across the room to now become a cabinet member. So we have a change there as well. Everybody else appears to be here. Simon Cook from Wight is not here this evening. We do have apologies from. Okay, apologies. Minutes of the previous meetings. We have 3 sets of minutes to go through. I'm assuming, I'm taking that you have all read all the sets of minutes. Does anybody have any queries at all on those minutes? Councillor Jarman, because it's usually Councillor Jarman. We're good to go?
Good.
We're good.
I'll move them if you want.
Yes, we move to. Yes, is that okay? And everybody happy? Yep, lovely, thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Do we have any public questions? We're getting through this evening. We have no general exceptions or urgent decisions. I have asked the Chief Executive to give us a quick progress update on where we are with devolution and with local government reorganisation. Okay.
Yeah, and apologies for coming at you from the corner of the room, but in terms of devolution, the consultation is now closed. We are unlikely to hear anything from the Minister until June. That was the indication that we were given. The Minister's going to be examining the responses that have been given, because his decision at this point is whether the tests have been met to proceed with drafting and producing a draft of the necessary statutory instruments to move forward with devolution. In terms of local government reorganisation, we are expecting some feedback on the interim proposals that the collective leaders and authorities across Hampshire, Southampton and the Isle of Wight submitted this week. I'm anticipating that's going to be the case, but it will depend on the capacity at MHCLG. I don't think that's going to give us any clear indication of the position in terms of the Isle of Wight being an exception. The Minister's made it very clear he's not going to give a view on that until after the autumn submission, when the detailed cases have to be in with government. I suspect he will just simply say, thank you, proceed with your detailed business cases. He may make his team may make some points of reference in terms of more detail might be useful on, but I'm just assuming what may come out of the team now. But hopefully something this week, if not, I would anticipate definitely next week. And as soon as we get anything back, it will be circulated so that you're aware of what the feedback's been on the interim proposals that were put in.
Thank you. Right, we will move to Isle of Wight Community Safety Partnership annual report. Before I hand over to the cabinet member, it would be really useful if our guests today could introduce themselves, if that's okay. So if we could go from Mr. Baxter down there?
I'm Cam, I'm the Community Safety Manager, so I'm based at the Isle of Wight Council. I also represent the CSP, I do Channel and Prevent, and I've been working on your strategic needs assessment this year.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm James Potter, Trading Standards and Community Safety Manager, working with Cameron.
Good evening, everybody. Chief Inspector Andy MacDonald. I'm District Commander for the Isle of Wight and Deputy to the Area Commander. Good evening, I'm Superintendent Rob Mitchell, Area Commander for Local Policing on the Isle of Wight.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over now to Karen. Is that okay? Can you introduce the
yeah.
report and give us a brief, please?
Glasses on. So the Isle of Wight Safety Partnership consists of several organisations, so it's a lot of collaboration. Working together to reduce crime and antisocial behaviour to ensure people feel safe. So the aim of this report is to provide partners with statistical analysis and information about crime, its changes and patterns over time where possible, and explanations as to why these changes have occurred. So it really is about looking at the facts and the data, and then bringing that to the CSP so we get a good understanding of what needs to be dealt with as a collaboration partner. So it does explain in here who the kind of partners that we've got. We've got the police here today, which is brilliant, but they're not the only people that tell fire, the probation services, housing providers, adult social, children's services, public health. So it really is a big collaboration of people that can really make a difference in our community. So any questions would be great. And I've got my esteemed colleagues here to help me.
Thank you, and thank you ever so much for the police for presenting. When there are so many partners, it's really good to see that you've made the effort, because this is a very important committee. It might be the last one of these committees before we move into a committee system, but it's really good that you've attended this evening, and hopefully we'll get some decent questions from the committee this evening. And in that case, I will hand over to the committee who would like to ask a question first, and of whom. I'm assuming you're all going to ask some questions after I summoned everyone. Councillor Downer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask the gentleman from the police about visible officers, like PCSOs and police officers, regularly walking the beat in certain areas. Is that possible to go back to the old days?
So
Or
I can
is there
answer that. That would be lovely. We live in the 21st century where we have to mix the wants and needs of all victims, and quite often a lot of crimes will dictate that there has to be a quick response. So unfortunately, we have to use officers in cars that will take away for the response grade 1s and grade 2s that have to be attended within 10 minutes or within an hour. But the role of the PCSO is about visibility. That's why that role was created, and it's our intention that they're out either on foot or on bicycle as much as possible. In fact, in the last 12 months, the old PC has invested in some electric bikes to actually help them some of the terrain. So that's always a priority of ours, to be the visible face of policing, certainly the PCSOs.
Having said that, this is why front desks are also open, so people can actually go in and see something. And I believe there's going to be something opening in the Bay Area at some point as well.
Councillor Downer has another question.
A supplementary, if I may.
Yes, please.
It's about two areas of the Isle of Wight. Now, Vauxhall, I know I've been playing here,
Sorry.
but we're in with Yarmouth in the West Wight, and that's got a huge area. We used to be with Ventnor, very accessible. Would you say that those resources are stretched with the West Wight by having to cover such a large area? Thank you.
Yeah, you're quite right, and this is the conundrum that policing has across the country, particularly in Isle of Wight, because we've got a lot of rural areas, and most people from rural communities, whether it's in Winchester or the Yarmouth area, say they don't see enough policing, and it's difficult because we talked about the towns. Yes, it's easy for me to get the PCSOs out on a push bike or on foot and be seen around the towns and the streets. You go rural, they have to go, into vehicles to do that. That is a challenge of ours to do that. I've recently started to reconfigure how our territories look on the Isle of Wight. So for the last 10 years or so, we've had 3 policing sectors with 3 police local neighbourhood inspectors who have their own teams to move them around. We are in the process of creating 2 teams in line with the new MPs parliamentary constituencies. So we'll go to an east and a west. And certainly in the east, the East Wight and the West Wight will look, have they actually got a fair share of PCSOs and bobbies to make sure that everybody's getting a fair distribution of local policing. But what I would say is that if you feel that there's beats or communities that aren't getting a proper look in, then please go to one of the two inspectors and let them know, because we're in that sort of planning phase where we're actually looking to distribute fairly where possible. So you're in Wroxall, did you say?
Yeah, we used to be, we were Ventnor,
Yeah,
although the police in Ventnor as well, and a bit down in PCSO.
yeah,
The thing is that, with it seems a bit remote,
yeah,
where are they coming from Yarmouth?
Yeah.
To come to Wroxall, and that's a huge area that they've got to cover.
yeah. And you know what, Councillor Downing, your PCSOs will say the same as well. You know, that they make it quite clear as well. They want to serve the public and be seen. And when they've got a huge territory like that, it's hard for them to be visible everywhere. So feed into the inspector. We're at that stage where if there's suggestions that come forward, that's great. The other bit we're keen to look at is the special constabulary. You know, our volunteers within the community, we are very low on numbers at the moment. After the years of austerity and Forest's extra 10,000 officers, we got an awful lot of our best specials became regulars. But what we need now is more volunteers to get in there and to help do some community policing as well. That helps with the visibility. It's that's something we can take away back to Rob Abel and Inspector Joe Nelson.
I think the historic part of it is we aligned the three areas based on the local authority localities, and I think that was done some years ago. But I think actually with the going down to two MPs, that's presented us a really good opportunity just to refresh and look at the way we deliver neighbourhood policing.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive. Thank you, Chair.
Just, it's on my list to do. I'll be sending out to all members, which is really easy for us because I spoke to Rob Mitchell about how we can have communication with the police. And actually, the way this is going to happen is going to be much easier for us as members to be able to get hold. So there'll be one inspector for West and one for East, and they will be our contacts. So actually, it makes it a lot easier. So you don't have to. And as that change, you've only got to let us know the two contacts, haven't you?
Yeah.
So I'll send those around.
Thank you. I have Councillor Stewart next. Okay, and then Councillor Jarman, did you have a question?
Thank you. I'm over in West Wight, Preston Capital Sharfleet, which is an enormous, great rural ward. There's been some concern from residents about rural crime, specifically landowners, in terms of loss of sort of all sorts of assets, including machinery. And you will be aware of the scam which recently you ended up with a lot of people coming down here to buy equipment. And they ended up very local to us. I mean, is there any ability to recognise that rural crime is somewhat different?
Yes. But there is, and our head of local policing, so Assistant Chief Constable McGovern, is in the process of formulating a rural crime unit beyond. If you're aware of rural crime, you'll be aware of Country Watch, which we've had in the constabulary for years. So they're predominantly based on the mainland. They spend a lot of the time dealing with travelling criminality, which we don't see so much on the island. It's expensive to get on and off with machinery, so an awful lot of the rural crime we get tends to be localised unless it's fraud of some kind. But there are plans in place to create a more proactive approach rather than just react to it, and dare I say probably get away from an awful lot of the wildlife crime which is about protection of endangered species or etc., and more getting into the bits that's actually keeping rural residents awake, the crime itself, the loss of machinery, the damage to crops through hair coursing, etc. as well. What I tend to find is the rural crime picture on the island is very different from, say, the north of Hampshire. But I'm keen to make sure that I'm not left out of that conversation on the mainland if there is proactive support that can come with this. So I would urge you, if there is crime, to make sure it's reported in the first place, because that old expression, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and quite often we're driven by the stats and the data telling us it. So if we've got people suffering in silence from rural crime and they're not reporting it because they might think there's not a lot the police are going to be doing, or they're not interested. Please report it, because if we can get an accurate picture of what's going on, it gives me a strong voice to go back to the mainland and ask for some proactive resources over here as well. I've always got that option, regardless of what they do on there. I've always got the option to bid through tactical planning meetings to say we've got a problem here and I want resources from the mainland, and we may come together. But we need that intelligence, and we need crime reporting to show us the need is here.
Can I just add something to it as well? So that scam you were mentioning, Councillor Stewart, I know exactly the one you're meaning. It was reported to us in Trading Standards. It is a common scam, unfortunately, that does hit the business community. And really, just to emphasise what Rob said, it's absolutely imperative that that's reported to us. If it's reported to us and the police, then we can use our powers and have the website taken down immediately as well, to prevent any further criminality. It's a bit like a chain reaction. We have to keep going, take the websites down. But at least as soon as we're told, we can do that. So far as the doorstep crime element is concerned as well, we are still receiving complaints and intelligence locally. So we do work with our policing colleagues to, when we get those instances on the island, that there are road traders on the island in those rural communities and in our urban towns as well. We act on those. That's still a priority for us, and we will prosecute it.
Slightly on the chair. So Councillor, you're absolutely right in terms of the rural community. They have, in certain parts of the country, felt quite isolated in terms of policing. What I would say here on the island, we've got really good engagement with our rural communities. So actually, I think the crime picture, I can say with some confidence that we have got low levels of rural crime. You know, geography plays a part of that. I've recently come back from Portsmouth, where Portsmouth was part of an area which had East Hants, and there's crime gangs which run up and down the motorways which target rural areas. We don't have that here. And actually the perception of rural crime to what the actual reality is slightly different. And that's something for us, generally across policing, we really need to address that through our engagement. But we can't rest on our laurels. We have got low crime rates in relation to rural crime. We need to be really absolutely on it in terms of we get those identifiers in terms of certain crime series, because we know they can take hold really quickly, and our response is really key in relation to that.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. Can I just follow that up? Because that's the really rural stuff, but we also have obviously small, quite tight villages, and you're right, rural the crime there is very limited. When it does fire off, recently in Brighton, for instance, you know, everybody knows about it and everybody starts panicking about it to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I've had raised with me is the neighbourhood watch scheme. Now, my understanding is that that is basically gone moribund locally.
Still there.
Still there.
But
It just needs volunteers to.
okay. So it follows on from what you were saying about special constabulary as well.
Yeah, you can join, can't you? There's a website. I'll send it to you.
Then that's me covered. Thank you very much, Chair.
I'm going to pop my question here. I'm very sensitive to this. Is a partnership annual report. And we know that we have people who will be coming through the system who from a young age need everybody's help to actually ensure that they don't become repeat offenders. You know, we've only got to open, you know, the local media or open your Facebook, and you can always, you know, the name, and you know, when someone's been caught, it's usually the crime. Can you just give us some examples of how you work together with partnership working to try and stop that repeat offender that maybe has the issues that come through the system of mental health or drugs or alcohol or something like that? How do you work in partnership to actually form a circle around that one person to try and prevent them from reoffending and going down the slippery slope and in and out of prison? How you work together, please.
Do my best to answer that. It's quite
Yes, that would be lovely.
there.
Yes.
There's lots of different parts of the CSP. We're not just one meeting that happens quarterly. Off the CSP, we have subgroups. So we have the joint action group, which is attended by partners as well. And that's often an opportunity to raise individuals, because the CSP meetings are more a strategic level where we're discussing issues beyond individuals or families. We're looking at wider problems that are occurring across the island. And when you boil it down to individuals, we look at those on a more smaller basis. So we have different meetings that we all attend. You have things like the neighbourhood management meeting, which is hosted by police, but it's a partnership-led meeting. So that will have police, housing, education, myself as community safety. And it might be at that meeting that we discuss a family or an individual, and off the back of that discussion, we might identify that there's a child there that may be at risk. And so it might be that off the back of a conversation or a discussion we've had a subgroup, that individual has been identified as someone that might be at risk of X, Y, and Z. There's so many complex social and economical issues here on the island and nationally that lead people to be in different sorts of vulnerabilities. But we do see that the joint working of all of our partners is really beneficial. We will often have a housing provider that's got an issue with antisocial behaviour between teen neighbours, but it might identify that the kids are misbehaving. So we can put something in place through our youth justice system or interventions. We can put in referrals for other mechanisms to try and get that kid involved in something positive, give them some positive role models. It's difficult, and I always go back to the fact that like idle hands cause mischief, and we need to keep our kids busy. We need to have things for them to do. We need to have provisions. We need to give them things that give them a sense of pride in the community that they're living in. So, like I said, it's a very difficult question to answer, and I'm very passionate about it. But yeah, there's a lot of things that we do collectively, but it's that relationship that we have between all the partners that's so good. Like my phone will ring and I'll pick it up and it will be Diane from Sovereign, and she'll say, "Oh, I've got an issue with this tenant. Can you help me?" And I'll pick up the phone and speak to one of Rob's officers. Or so it's lovely on the Isle of Wight, having come from East London and Essex, where I worked previously, to have this really tight-knit community of people. And it's very incestuous in the sense that today I hosted or chaired the channel panel, and most of the people there are probably representatives that I sit with on the CSP, the people that I sit with on the JAG. So we've all got these good relationships, and we can pick up on things and share information. So I don't know, I'm terrible for going off on tangents, but
can I just add a supplementary to that, Jamal?
Yeah.
Just, I think he sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of effective partnerships about relationships, but it's not just about patting yourself on your back. It's about having that effective challenge across agencies and a process thing. And a bit of a lifetime example, if I may, since I returned to the island in October. So myself and Ashley at the back there have consciously really worked to bring our two teams more effectively together. We know we've got shared areas of business. We've got young people that we both manage collectively and also singly. But not sure if the committee are aware in terms of the Isle of Wight MASH is now in force. And I run a daily meeting where it's traditionally just been a police-only meeting, but we have now had a representative from the MASH come over. And what that does is facilitates those really quick time conversations, so we can have that quick time perspective from all different agencies in relation to our young people, and that's covers a whole range of different perspectives. But for me, what's really important about that, I know that as a cop I can get quite focused on law enforcement, but actually in terms of that diversity piece, I need someone from Ashley's team to come here and offer that wider perspective in terms of, as you quite rightly say, in terms of that diversion off from the criminal justice route.
Thank you. That was sort of the answer I was looking for. Thank you so much. That was really good. Councillor Jarman, thank you.
Yeah, so I've got a question, but also some information to pass on, which I thought I'd do today as well, because the opportunity is there. We still have a problem with the police non-emergency number reporting system refusing to give reference numbers. So I'll just give you that to take away. We've had quite a number of instances recently. The reason that they justify not giving a reference number is they're not sure if it's a real crime, the phrase that's very often used at the moment. Now, it's not for, I think, the ordinary people and residents to determine if it's a real crime or not. They perceive something which is wrong, and they will use that number. It might not be something that requires a 999, but they do want a response. And in particular, they do expect to get a reference number. So we've been encouraging them to persist in that. Yeah. So if you have a way of getting in contact with a group that manages that, might be useful. We've also had instances where things have been passed through to the non-emergency, even by parish clerks, but have not come down to the PCSO because they've been filtered out in whatever internal systems you have. Maybe it's not enough of a priority. Maybe it doesn't fit the right colour of the cloth for that day of the week. I don't know. But things are not coming down to the PSO. And our PCSO, we've raised things with them and they said, "Oh, I've not had that come to me yet." Weeks after the issue's been raised. So I'll just leave that with you. When you're talking about partnerships, and it's very good, you know, what Cam was saying just now. We often think of partnerships as being very lateral across a number of different organisations. But on the island, if we were to rely on just those organisations at that level, I think we'd be missing out on a big trick. So the same way that the number of police officers to do investigative work and preventative work is very limited, you do have the PCSOs under that, and you have, of course, some specials under that in some areas, but the neighbourhood watch area in our area is very strong. I'm a neighbourhood watch coordinator, for example. What has happened is I think we're struggling to make that hierarchical link into the PCSOs and into the police network in some way. So if we could think of a way to think of partnerships not only as being horizontal across all different organisations, but within the matrix, see the number of people we've got in a residence community and within a neighbourhood watch group is many more than you would ever have in terms of PCSOs or police officers in that area. You know, it might be in my group, let's say 10 neighbourhood watch people for one PCSO. In that one PCSO, there might be a couple of PCSOs for one police officer. So clearly you've got a multiplying effect that could play out in policing on the island. And the plea that comes from the neighbourhood watch group, which I'm part of, and others in my area, is the questions raised with us have changed quite dramatically in the last 10 or 20 years. We increasingly feel a little bit unable to deal with some of them. It used to be troubled youths over at Branston Chine or at Linston Chine, and I think you're familiar with those, Andy. But nowadays, it's much more about technology. So people who in my community are perhaps of a different age group than you might normally associate with technology are still using it. And they're worried a lot of the time about events that happen and about scamming and about phone calls. And many of them don't have access to the bulletins that the council put out. They just don't see them because they're not on Facebook or whatever. But they do come to the neighbourhood watch meetings and to our place looking for that connection within the community. And what do I do about it? How do I know if this is something real or not real, and how do I take it forward? Who can help me at a practical level? So if we could think about that approach from top to bottom, about embracing the people who are in those neighbourhood groups, educating them how to help people, I think there'd be a much greater success rate in feeding that back up.
Chair,
I'm very open to ideas.
I think
yeah, I can help with that, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Jarman, we can have your details and all of the information that we put out through trading standards with scam alerts, and we can make sure that comes out to you as a neighbourhood watch coordinator directly as quick as we get the information.
And to all neighbourhood watch coordinators,
yeah, absolutely,
I'm the only one.
No, so through our Isle of Wight Against Scams partnership, IWASP, we've got partners on there, and the information comes through very quickly once we get notified of a scam, so we can work with that to get part of IWASP and to get the information out to the neighbourhood watch coordinators.
and also give you all the details about training. So
Yeah.
I've done all my training on scams and things. So
Scam.
if phones get scammed, you can do all of that as well. So we'll send that out to you.
How do I scan my system for viruses? A common question we get all the time.
Phishing, yeah.
Not something that traditionally we've done. It would have more been about youths throwing stones. But the idea of what the role is, I think, is evolving. And I don't know if you coordinate that, what we do as an Isle of Wight with the other areas, because Neighbourhood Watch is clearly a national scheme.
Yeah.
And we do get the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Neighbourhood Watch information coming down to us. I have to say it does tend to be whatever you feed into it, which for most months is 99% Hampshire and not a lot of Isle of Wight.
Yeah, sure. No, we can make that very local, and yeah, more than happy for an officer and the team to come out and attend a meeting for residents as well. Do that.
Our place on Tuesdays.
Can I just add to that I know some parish councils and some areas have their own like Facebook groups and things like that, that as soon as the stuff comes out from trading standards, it is shared. So I know, I'm a new church and parish councillor it's my last one tonight after this, but we're very good at making sure that goes up on Facebook sites and gets shared around really quickly, the stuff that comes out of trading standards and what current scams are. So that's really useful as well. Did you have a response?
Yeah, if I may. So just in relation to the first point you made about the contact management centre, I really accept feedback you're giving us there. If you've got any case specific examples, but we will absolutely feed that back through the chain for our counterparts in the police contact centre on the mainland. It's a shame, actually. I didn't know that question was coming because myself and Cam, we recently attended the Town and Parish Council Association, and there's a really good slide that the temporary chief constable is really keen for us to share out in the communities around 101 and 999 performance. And over a 3-year period, it is a really real success story for the constabulary. So if it's okay, we'll probably circulate that around afterwards because it's.
If you send it to Megan, and then what she'll do is send it to all members, so all members can have that then. Really useful.
A good measure, I think, is just to look at the number of primary incident report calls that you get and the number of police reference numbers that are issued.
Yeah, I certainly have that.
If they're the same.
We'll absolutely look at that,
they're
but
there.
yeah, one of the indicators is about your abandoned calls at 101 and 999, and in the percentage.
It's the timeliness
Yeah.
has improved dramatically over the last 2 years, through investment through the PCC's office as well. And it literally is, it was horrendous 101 4 or 5 years ago. People were just giving up and it was embarrassing. I'd go home and friends and family would complain about it. It was that bad. It really is slick now. So when you mentioned, I thought it was going to be, it's much better, but the reference bit must, I get it if they're saying we can't give you a crime reference number
There must be
because
a
it's not
reference
been
number.
assessed as a crime, but there must be a way of giving the caller a reference of some kind. That just seems like something's lost in translation. So we'll take that away. And the other bit, probably need to go back and do some homework with this. Certainly my time as the commander in Portsmouth, I ensured my inspectors had regular meetings with neighbourhood watch coordinators. They would come together. So they need to be supported as a group. I know you've got the national side of it, but I expected my local policing inspector to have regular contact with coordinators to share crime trends, etc., and share intelligence, if nothing else, on things that have been seen and heard in the community. So we'll take that away. I'm thinking about the 21st century as well. We have Hampshire Alert that's been around for a long time. The constabulary's invested a lot of money to boost the license, so we have more of a two-way dialogue with it now. Before, Hampshire Alert was really just a vehicle to push out alerts to people, but other constabularies were paying for the full fat license, if you like, with everything added. We've now got the ability to actually communicate two-way, so people can come back to us with concerns and keep a dialogue going about what issues are in their area, etc. I'm also told we've got the ability to create virtual communities. So there must be something within that Hampshire Alert Let's Talk platform for us to create some kind of virtual community with our neighbourhood watch to share things slickly between the mediums. So we'll take that away.
That's right.
My view is you should be getting more contact with local policing than what you seem to be getting.
Send that through to
Yeah.
Lemon-List.
Thank you.
So going back a little bit as well, just in terms of what we've been discussing, just to repeat that everything is stat driven. It's all about statistics. It's all about numbers. There is a finite number of resources. There's a finite number of police officers. There's a finite number of staff. The whole purpose of the community safety partnership is not to overwhelm the police, because we are far too relying on the police for everything. And I think this is probably a good opportunity to sort of offer the community safety partnership as a mechanism to try and filter out some of those things. It might be that you're not getting crime reference numbers because what's being reported doesn't meet the threshold for a crime. It doesn't mean it's something that we shouldn't be aware of, or that action can't be taken, preemptive action to prevent it coming or getting to the standard or threshold where it is a crime. So I think that potentially the community safety partnership could act as a branch to policing to, like I say, try and resist or reduce that reliance on their time and resources. I think realistically, the problem with living in a nice area is that it's supply and demand, isn't it? Or demand and supply. If you're not making a case for that resource being in your area, then it's not going to be there. So I think part of what we need to do as well is make sure that if there are issues, they need to be reported. One thing I was going to mention earlier was CPIs, which is Community Partnership Information Reports. Now, everyone here in this room, you can submit these to the police on behalf of your constituents. So it's things that you might not have evidence, you might not have a crime reference number, but you've got some intel, and that can go into the police. And I had an email today to me and my colleague Dave thanking us for some intel we'd put in, because it helped sort of take an investigation to the next step. But you often don't see those incremental steps. But in the background, that intel really helps. It might be that piece of intel that is enough then to go to a magistrate and get a warrant for a drugs raid or something like that. So if anyone wants any input about how to submit CPIs or things like that, I'm really keen to facilitate that training. That's something we're looking to refresh again this year.
Thank you.
I don't think we can do it really.
Sorry, just to build on that as well, the CPI thing is 1,000 times better than just sending an email into the local inspector. Because if you fill in the CPI, it goes into our Force Intelligence Bureau, where it goes straight into the police data system as intelligence. So those gaps about PCSOs not knowing what's going on, that's closing it immediately, because they all get to see the intelligence that's fed through as well. So that is a shortcut system of getting your information assessed by an intelligence officer and into the police database.
Brilliant, thank you. Councillor Blake.
Thank you for coming in, guys. And it's a great report. It's clear data in it, which gives us a really good idea of what the island's looking at the moment. Just a couple of comments on it first. The domestic abuse rates for the Isle of Wight compared to the rest of the Hampshire are quite high numbers here, and it is an increasing number despite the obvious peak in COVID times, which I think was observed nationally. It's still an increasing number, taking that out of context. I do think this is another clear indication that we need to really improve that domestic abuse strategy that I think works really into it. No, certainly, not to say Redrup as chair of the health scrutiny has really sort of championed, but really wanted to enhance how that strategy is put together and the content of it. Just a very quick question with as almost supplementary to the first question, the drugs that are listed in here as drug offences, does that include drug driving, things like that? Because I noticed it's quite a high number. I would say I'm the member for Ventnor and St Lawrence, and I would say from my residents that currently the crimes that my residents are observing the most is shoplifting and twin with that antisocial behaviour. I think you're probably thinking of the same people that I am that are linked to both those things, as well as driving offences being very high, including drug driving. Would you say they are the sort of the key things that you're seeing at the moment, or is there other unobserved crimes that are more prevalent?
Anyone will think you also looked at our Isle of Wight policing priorities for 25-26. So we've got the community safety strategy here as well. But as the area commander with my senior leadership team, we set our priorities for the year, and certainly for us, it's domestic abuse is a big priority for us. Drug-related harm. So the drug-related harm, when we talk about drug offences, we're not necessarily talking about drug driving. That's dealt with under all of those. If people are caught with something that's more than possession or Class A drugs, then yes, it will be crimed and prosecuted as such. When we talk about drug-related harm, we're talking about drug dealing, and we're talking about the violence associated with drug dealers as well, enforcing debts and territory, etc. Antisocial behaviour remains one of our 5 priorities for the island. It's what residents and communities are telling us. We've done surveys through the Let's Talk forum at the moment, and ASB, road safety and drugs remain 3 of the top 5 priorities that come back to us. Retail crime as well, shoplifting. So that remains a priority for us. We've had a 26% increase on it compared with the year before. A bit like domestic abuse, it's not a bad thing to see an increase. It just means that businesses have actually got confidence that actually it's worth reporting it now. I think through the years of austerity, when there was a lot of policing cuts, a lot of police chiefs had to make tough decisions on, if you've got 1,000 less cops, you can't do everything. So you have to prioritise, and they have something called threat, risk and harm. And if you've got competing priorities, violence against the person, domestic abuse, homicide, serious things like that, child abduction, child exploitation will take priority over shoplifting or minor criminal damage. We're now at a stage where everybody's got more police officers, so there's not an excuse anymore to say it's low level and we've got to prioritise the other ones. So we have gone out over the last 18 months and engaged with businesses, and that's why we've had this increase in reporting. It's not great for my crime book because I was at my force performance group meeting on the mainland today and I've got a spike in it. But I see that as businesses actually bothering to report now because they can see that we're arresting people and we're putting them in magistrates' courts. So retail crime will be a priority next year, as well as road safety, because unlike a lot of my mainland colleagues, whenever we ask the public about priority, the roads concern them, drunk drivers, dangerous drivers, etc. We are a little bit of a hostage to being an island on here. Actually, the Isle of Wight is a safe place to live. We have very engaged, very energetic local media on the Isle of Wight. And I'll be honest with you, the amount of times you read the Island Echo, for instance, and it's reporting on a car accident, it wouldn't even get the time of day in Portsmouth or in the cities because there's many other things going on at the moment. So I see quite often an awful lot of the reporting on shunts and car crashes, etc., is an indication that there's less harmful crime going on there as well. That's not to say we don't have an issue on the island. They are rural roads, and when you do get an accident, sometimes the results can be catastrophic with cars ending up on the roofs as well. So that's why it remains a priority for us, because one, it concerns the public, and two, we want to reduce road harm as well. So four of my 5 priorities you mentioned down that one update, yeah, they're a priority for us.
Did you want to come in, Councillor?
Just to touch on, because I don't want to take Donna's thunder on that, but she's put some money into an app that's going to be launched soon for shoplift, to catch shoplifters, for businesses and shops. So basically, the problem that you have is that shoplifters will move town to town, but there's not that continuity. So if they've known in Ryde, they might move around. So this app will be connected, won't it? And so if something's happening here, people over here know about it. So they're less able to move around.
So
So the
can
focus will be on that.
we make that clear that that's under the Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna Jones? Because
So that will
the
help.
minutes will just say Donna's doing this and it won't be relatable in the minutes in the future. Is that okay? Thank you.
That will help with the shoplifting.
Thank you.
Supplementary,
Yeah.
that's just comments on that. I mean, speaking to some of the Tesco staff who move around their various sites on the island, I was surprised to learn that they are most hesitant to take up a shift at Ventnor compared to the other stores, which I was quite surprised by. So, I mean, it's good that you now feel that you've got enough officers to sort of start targeting that kind of thing. Just as this is corporate scrutiny, is there anything that the council would like to see us do better to help you as
Like more CCTV.
Working on it. Yeah.
And it's, one of my inspectors did a recent fact-finding mission to Jersey. It was necessary. It was an island forum we were invited to actually see how the police in islands, because we are very different from the mainland of Hampshire, and the results in driving down crime and improving community sense of safety, because that's the important thing. You've got community safety and you've got a sense of being safe as well. CCTV actually operated with an operator does make a big difference. I know it costs a lot of money and it's challenging in challenging budgets, but that would make a big difference for me as a police commander within the community safety partnership, if money could be found to increase that service.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I may, Chair, as well.
Yes, of course.
Having recently returned from Portsmouth, so Portsmouth, you completely different operating environment. They had a strong contingent of community wardens, so that visible presence from the local authority out in the communities who worked really closely with the police teams. If there was a wish list, absolutely, in terms of having seen the benefits in another area, in terms of how you can take things like problem solving, crime prevention, engaging with your communities to that next level. That would be my sort of ask.
I think you're absolutely right, because when we got the gripper funding, we found it very difficult to get partners, didn't we, to be able to.
Yeah, if you want me to speak about the GRIP funding, we kind of got going to swear then. We've kind of got the poor end of
Just
the.
remember the presser in the corner, so try
Oh,
not
wait.
to, please.
Do not swear.
We got the sort of poor end of the stick in the sense that we struggled to really make best use of that funding that became available. And we didn't have the internal infrastructure to immediately spend that money as it came into us, which is frustrating because we spend the whole year chasing any small pot of money that we can get. And then suddenly a large sum of money was given to us, but with strings and caveats about how it needed to be spent, and a one size fits all briefing for the whole of Hampshire that didn't really suit our needs. I think that's something that I'm quite keen to do through the CSP. Is we've discussed today a lot of the problems that we're seeing, but we have to understand what's causing these problems. Why have we got people that are shoplifting? Why have we got X, Y, and Z? We need to look at the causes of these problems and resolve them before they sort of materialise. But when you're doing stuff like that, you're fighting fires, and it's very difficult to offer preventative measures and show how beneficial they are, as opposed to something retrospectively. But yeah, there are cultural and social economical issues across the whole island, lots of things, lots of risk factors and vulnerabilities of people being drawn into antisocial behaviour, crime, exploitation, manipulation. Like, the list is endless and they all overlap. So as our police colleagues have said, if we had more resources, we could be a lot more effective in the same way the police could, but it is supply and demand and resources are finite. So if we could wave a magic wand, I think we'd have more officers. Or
Thank you.
Just to touch on CCTV, we have
hold on.
been working on it, haven't we?
Karen, Karen. I want to bring the chief executive on. She was waving before you, sorry,
Just to
through.
touch on the
Yeah,
CCTV, we'll do
You
that.
you do need to go through the chair because I am watching everybody.
I was
Thank
just
you.
going to say that I think what the gripper funding is a good example, is a national scheme where the conditions of spend are set at a national level, and it's not flexible enough to enable local circumstances to then be used to flex and form spend which meets your local need. So I guess there's something around lobbying for national schemes that deliver funding to just have a very high level criteria set, but then enable flexibility in terms of being able to be delivered locally due to local circumstances. And I think the island would be able to access much more. We could have that sort of approach to funding.
Thank you. Councillor Drew.
Thank you. In terms of the reoffending rates having gone up so substantially, I appreciate that obviously the way that it's reported has changed, which may have led to a spike. I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you see as potentially the drivers and how the council might be able to assist with that. I mean, I assume from a layman's perspective that it may be around training and opportunity in relation to employment, and whether we are able to, for example, as the chief exec has sort of alluded to, look at ways of being more flexible as to how we offer that potentially off island, potentially with other partnerships. I don't know if you could speak on that.
do you want me to jump in? Okay, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
Again, I think it's a tricky one in terms of reoffending. We might be looking at a very small cohort that reoffend, and they are the cohort that are very difficult to engage with. They're sort of career criminals, and they're people that maybe intervention and provisions have been offered to, but it's not been successful. It doesn't mean we give up. We try and we try and we try, but you do have people that inevitably will reoffend, unfortunately. So, I mean, it's a tricky one in terms of your question around why are people reoffending. Again, there's 1,000,001 reasons. I mean, we've got levels of poverty, financial stress, domestic tension. There's so many things that could contribute to people being in that situation. Like you mentioned, the lack of housing, a lack of career aspirations. So I think through the CSP, we're very keen to try and engage with young people, understand what their thoughts are with the island, how they see things materialising in years to come, to prevent them falling into the same traps that previous generations have.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
I'm okay, Chair. My question's been
It's been
inadvertently
answered.
answered, so yeah.
Councillor Brodie.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report, which has been very interesting indeed. And most of the questions I might have asked have already been asked, but a couple of areas I think I'd just like to mention. We've talked a lot about rural crime. We haven't really addressed urban crime so much. There's a chart on page 44 Without the papers in front of us, that breaks it down by what used to be the electoral wards. I represent Pan and Barton in Newport, the most deprived ward on the Isle of Wight. I think it's a great place. I'm not sure that some of my residents would say that policing is that great there, to be honest. May have improved in recent times, but certainly 101, etc., became a bit of a joke on Pan for members of the community who were constantly advised by me to report crime, because that's the only way in which you get anything done. I'm pleased to hear things that have improved there. I must admit I haven't heard that back from residents who are concerned about things, but I'll try and get that message out. If you've got that slide and you can get it to Megan at some point, that's something I can put in one of my next newsletters, etc., and try and encourage people to use it. It's certainly, the chart on page 44 breaks it down by ward, and it makes it look as if Newport, my town, is, you know, a crime hotspot, you know, certainly compared to, say, Ryde, you know, and yet when I read the media, most of the nasty crime appears to happen in Ryde rather than Newport, and I think that's probably because a lot of crimes reported across the road, which is in one of the Newport wards at Newport Police Station. Just to flag that up, that of course most crime probably does happen in urban areas, and if you look at that chart on page 44, it's 4 of the top 5 wards are in there. Newport Central, what we used to be called Newport North, my ward, which used to be called Newport East, and the Parkhurst ward. One other issue that we haven't touched on relates to absences from school, which is on page 34 of our report, showing that absences are higher relative to the southeast, relative to statistical neighbours, and relative to England in 2023, and have been over successive years for quite a period of time. But there's quite an alarming sentence within the report there, which I think probably follows up on something that the police commissioner has been getting into a lot of trouble recently, where it says, just out of the blue, the Isle of Wight has a large home educating community of over 600 children, as well as 2 independent schools, which are not included in these figures. That's almost a suggestion, as I think Donna Jones has been accused of suggesting that home educated children are more likely to commit crime. What's your view on that? Thank you.
I can answer that. I don't think that at all. It's up to a parent if they're doing it properly. And my concern is the child is getting a proper education in a safe environment. I'm not an educationalist, so it's not for me to comment on it. As a copper of nearly 30 years, I've always been of the view, if kids aren't in school, where are they? Are they in a safe environment, or are they wandering the street? That's always the question I ask. But I'm not an educationalist. It's not for me to decide what's best for a child. Parents to work out with education authority. However, for me, I'm also the prevent lead for the constabulary. And if we look at recent activity over the last couple of years on the Isle of Wight, we've had 2 terrorism arrests of under 16-year-olds on the Isle of Wight. And there is a concern about radicalisation of young people through the internet, going down rabbit holes, children who might be on the spectrum of some kind that might be more susceptible than others to follow certain ideologies or be groomed by bad actors, if you like. Who's watching out for those children? There's a lot of investment that goes into school and education authorities to help support people, you know, either with prevent or channel, or actually saying actually prevent's not the right route for this young person. This is what we need to do as a partnership. Are guardians and parents who are homeschooling being supported in the same way? That would concern me, that they're actually not getting the same service they would if the child was in a school. But going back to where they're more likely to, you know, commit crime and that's, I'm not an educationalist, and I don't see the stats for that.
Thank you. I think it's really important we bring Mr. Whitaker in here
Yeah.
for his view, please, Ashley.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair, for the question. It's a very interesting topic, elective home education on the island. And when I think about it, the first thing I think of is that we need to understand that it's not a homogenous group. So we have 600, it says in the report, actually goes up during the academic year. but we need to really think about this group in its constituent parts. So we absolutely, within there, we have families who choose to electively educate their children as their first choice. That is their right, and we absolutely respect that. Of the 600, that is about 200 families choose to do it. It's their first choice. There are 3 other groups within the other 400 families and grows throughout the year. The first group are families who have children with special educational needs. As we've heard, often it's children who have autism or other communication needs, for example. Their needs have not been met in school. And I know this because their parents write to me on a regular basis. And in fact, after we had the local article that Police and Crime Commissioner put into the local media, I had a very significant increase in the amount of correspondence I had from local families. And this is what they were saying. My children have special educational needs. In fact, I met with a dad. Here are the notes that he gave me a week before last. He came in to speak to me about it. And they've taken their children out of school because their needs have not been being met. So that's the second group. The third group is families who have children who have very poor mental health because of whatever's happening in school. Their mental health has deteriorated and they've basically said, we're not prepared for this to carry on. I'm taking my children out of school. And the fourth group are children who are not, I would say, getting any meaningful education whatsoever. They've been taken out of school by their families. And often those families are known to other services as well. And I know this because if you drop into the multi-agency panel we have on a regular basis where we talk about children who've been arrested, and we ask the question on every single child, what education is this child receiving? A high proportion, a significant proportion of them, the answer will come back, they're electively home educated. And those are the group, that is probably the smallest group of those 4 different categories that the Police and Crime Commissioner is talking about. But I think what's most important is we don't treat that group as a homogenous group. They're different, and those families have chosen to go down that route for different reasons. And we're very cognizant of that. It's a very significant area we're working with colleagues very proactively on. We have our new school improvement team that have started full-time today, actually. And that's going to be one of their key priorities. And across children's services, what we're looking to do is continue to work in increasingly joined up fashion. So, for example, if we have teams who are working with mainstream schools to improve the level of inclusion in mainstream schools, we're looking to have them work much more proactively with our colleagues in the Youth Justice Service and the Community Safety Partnership to make sure that we're sharing information about who these children are. We're sharing data, sharing information across agencies where necessary to make sure that we can be more proactive with these children, to make sure that they're getting the support that they need, that they're being reintegrated into education where appropriate, and also put onto pathways. We heard a bit about pathways into employment, and that's often where we need to focus on the long-term goal for these young people, is as they enter adulthood to make sure that they are moving into some kind of meaningful employment. And if they can do that, they're less likely to then become involved in other areas that we don't want them to be involved in. I hope that gives some increased added information.
Can I just bring Councillor Brody back in?
Yeah, and thanks to the superintendent for his response, and to Mr. Whitaker. I'm not suggesting by any means that I agree with Donna Jones, far from it. I just think it's a little unfortunate that that sentence is within the report, because it does tend to give some credence to that suggestion, which I would suggest if somehow or other that could be removed from the report, it would be best. I mean, certainly I live on the main drag between my ward and Medina College, and I'm always very interested in the number of children I see regularly out of school hours who I know should be in school on that track. I mean, I don't know what to do with that. I mean, I'm not somebody who generally goes running to authority about things. I'm a live and let live sort of person, which is probably why I've managed to be elected for 20 years to represent Pan and Barton. But it just makes me wonder, you know, as to what we do as a local authority and as schools to really address unauthorised absences in recent years. I mean, it's quite clearly the trend it hasn't improved, or you know, look at it quickly at the graph there. I mean, it's deteriorated. It's on page 10 of the actual report. It's 34 of the cabinet papers. The graph, it's deteriorating compared to all the comparators, etc. And I'm just wondering what we're doing as a local authority, and in terms of what are the schools doing. I mean, I'm old enough to remember things like the truant officer or educational welfare officer, etc. Probably most of us here, Ronnie, will probably remember that as well, you know, Chris, etc. But do we have people in that sort of role these days? Because I'm not aware of it, which I think is quite troubling, really. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll bring you back in.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The earlier part, I can absolutely say with a huge degree of confidence in terms of there's no distinguishing between homeschooled and children in education. But what I would say is in terms of where we do have children, young people who are committing crime, in terms of a problem-solving approach, actually the committing of crime is often a symptom of a more underlying cause. And the way I would often approach it, and certainly linking it here with teams in a local authority, is actually it's really key to have education around the table when you're looking at something holistically in terms of bringing in those long-term sustainable solutions in terms of when young people are committing crime. But in terms of the wider conversation there, I think the word is probably a little bit as we want it to be in the report.
Thank you. I have two more questions and then I'll bring this part of the meeting to a close, which is Councillor Jarman and then Councillor Brake, and then we will move on to the next part of the agenda and we'll let you go on and enjoy the rest of your evening, unless you want to sit through the rest of the meeting. Councillor Jarman.
So earlier we spoke about the multiplier effect, a few police down the neighbourhood watch. I think the same opportunity is there with the point that you raised about CCTVs, but I have no idea how to take it forward. In our area, we have quite a number of CCTV cameras. Some of them are personal, some of them are within the parish, some of them are within the school. What we don't have, it seems, is a mechanism whereby that activity can be coordinated. Is there a facility, for example, where I can give you the code, which I could do right now, so that you can see the imagery real time, the recorded information from my CCTV cameras outside of my building, or that I can give you the ones from the mobile, they're called wildlife cameras, about this big green ones, you've probably seen them. Police used to have them and loan them out at one time, which are placed around the area when there's a particular hotspot or a problem. Is there a way that people can give you the access to that network, and what controls are in place to make that work? Clearly the multiplying effect from a few cameras placed by the council to perhaps thousands of cameras placed on doors, windows, walls, etc. would be huge.
Can I just say that I think all of this is really good as long as it's all being monitored, and the whole point of the question, the CCTV, is to actually make sure that we've got monitored systems. We've seen it before in other areas, haven't we, that actually it's not so much how many cameras you've got up, it's actually who's watching the cameras is the most useful. So I've just sort of answered your own question for you, which I shouldn't have really, but hey ho.
Some meat to it. So what we need to do is flip that problem on its head. It's not a case of giving police access to that live footage, because as we said, resources is limited. It's more a case of police being able to access footage or know where cameras are when they should need it. So if they're doing an investigation in an area, they can identify that there's cameras owned there. So part of the work I've done through the CSP over the last year is a full audit of every single Island Roads camera on our network, not only where it is, but the entirety of what it captures. So each of those cameras can capture, maybe some of them are 360, some of them are 180. And what I've done is I've given police sergeants in the area a list of every camera, as well as an image of what that camera can capture. So what we're hoping to do there is actually make better use of what we've got. So if the police are investigating a crime that's happened in an area, they can look at that resource and say, that camera might have captured that. I can go to Island Roads and I can get that footage. Additionally, what I have done is sent out requests at all of the town and parish councils, because there is a secondary network that's not owned or monitored by the Isle of Wight Council directly. These are all the independent ones that the town and parish council have. But again, they're a resource. So what I've asked is for town and parish councils to let us know where those cameras are and supply us with images of what they capture. I have sent out a few reminders, and I think we've only had about a third of them come back. But that could be a very valuable resource to police officers that are investigating crimes that are covered by this secondary network. It is just a case of making better use of what we've got until we can afford to increase what we have.
So just to follow up on that, Chair, through you, is there a mechanism where our neighbourhood watch group can provide you with the details of all the cameras on our networks that we have? So if you have a problem, let's say in Hurst Point, with you knocking on doors and running away or breaking windows, which we know news about it, we could give you wireless access real time at the time you get that 101 or 999 to about 14 doorbell cameras.
Unfortunately, in terms of the information governance, it's
I think-
not quite.
I think the legislation would
So
stop us, yeah.
you could just look at those real time and see where the users are, which house are they running to at the moment,
I think
and basically follow them.
I think that offer is great for after the event evidence gathering. Anything live time, we're getting into the realms of the information commissioner. We'd need, there's whole raft of legislation about police using surveillance in public places. And we need an authority for every operation to do that.
For every doorbell.
Yeah. It's great for after the event when we're evidence gathering and door knocking and gaining access, and we can upload all of this onto a digital platform.
So you could, through the neighbourhood watch, say,
Yep.
we're looking, not just through town and parish councils, we're looking for this street at this time, what have you got?
Oh, yes.
So we could deliver that.
Yeah, after the event, it's great. But what brings the public reassurance is the lifetime monitoring, usually by a non-police officer, because people get worried about Big Brother if they think there's a Bobby watching them going down the street. That's what gives the sense of reassurance that if something happens, police can be directed in. There's something happening. You need to get here now. That's what makes people feel safe. Prevention.
Thank you.
Just while you
And
finish,
then-
I know you're finishing and
Then councillor.
but we've been working on the CCTV issue for a while now, and this is why you've been doing all the work that you've been doing. So I'm sure something's going to come to the committee about that. Once we've done all the work, and so that the PCC is looking to give some funding to be able to, for that to be monitored.
And
It's just the way it's going to be monitored. So
Actually, when we-
for paper to
can
come,
report back as this committee that it's
Yeah.
minuted, that it's the wish list and the ask of the police to actually improve things, to actually have a monitored system.
so we're working on that. Yeah.
Councillor Blake.
Okay, very quick point, Chair. I mean, my question was actually answered very eloquently by Mr. Whitaker. I think we just have a very clumsy definition of that. Once upon a time, probably adequately suited the situations that we had in terms of home education, but now we have people that are home educated and people that are simply just not educated. And that is obviously a problem, not only for crime and things. There's also a problem, a safeguarding issue there, that there isn't another set of eyes on those children, and we need, that is something obviously we're going to have to look for in the future.
I think it would be, don't need to go to the vote or recommend it, but I think you need to take on board what Councillor Brodie has said. That line within the report quite clearly can be misconstrued. So it would be, this committee would appreciate that if that could be actually reworded in a way that isn't just a one-liner, and otherwise it does read in such a way that it takes on board that whole cohort. So I think that would be one of the things the committee would like to see, if that could actually be worded within the report to make it very clear that it doesn't refer to just all home educated children. Maybe Mr. Whitaker can have a look at that for you and put it in a more eloquent terms within the report to actually, broaden it out. It might take up a few more paragraphs, but actually, this is a report that's being read now, but if you read it in 6 months, it's still going to read the same as it does now and be taken on board in the same way it is now. Thank you ever so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. At the committee to confirm it's satisfied that the partnership is fulfilling its statutory duty. Are we happy with that and just vote on that? It's okay. Are we happy to move to the vote? That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for your time. It's really appreciated. you. Oh, please, can we ask Mr. Whitaker and the Chief Executive to stop hiding in the corner, please? I feel like I need to sing a song from Dirty Dancing to when to prayer and nobody puts baby in the corner. If you can move forward, would be appreciated. Sharon, do you want to come and move forward as well? Because I can see you're just trying to type things up and it's not going to do your back any good sat there. No. Move forward, then at least you've got your laptop and your balancing. Okay. Right, we move to the review of the Cabinet agenda. We can see that there's 3 papers on there that will be discussed on Thursday. And so we do firstly to the Isle of Wight education strategy, and then next to expansion of the special educational needs provision. We want to move first to A. And Mr. Whitaker introduce it, and then we'll move to the committee with the new cabinet member like to introduce it. It's nice to see you here, Councillor Baker. Thank you for taking the time to come.
So would you like to have the education strategy first? Is that what you said? Sorry.
Yeah, actually the other way around.
It's.
I have A, Isle of Wight education strategy, then I have B, expansion of special educational needs provision. Yes.
So the education strategy is the output from a strategy which was published last July. And overall, the aim of the strategy is to improve education outcomes for all children. It's a strategy through until 2030, so essentially 5-6-year strategy. And it's made up of essentially 5 priorities in the strategy. They're called pillars. So the first thing is about high aspirations, about being aspirational for all our children and young people. The second pillar is about having a rich curriculum. The third pillar is about the quality of support we have for children with special educational needs and disabilities. The fourth pillar is around having a highly trained workforce. And the fifth pillar is around having a sustainable education infrastructure. And so within that, we have the realignment of the number of school places we have to the number of children we have in our evolving population. We received quite a significant amount of feedback over the months following the publication of the draft strategy in July. There are some details of the engagement events that we did during that time in paragraph 16, and in 17 paragraph 17 there are some examples of the changes that were made to the draft strategy that fed into the final strategy. So the recommendation for this item will be for Cabinet on Thursday to adopt the Isle of Wight education strategy, and secondly to delegate to the Strategic Director for Children's Services and Education the authority to make any minor changes in consultation with the Cabinet Member of Children's Services and Education which do not materially affect the content of the document. So that's an overview of the strategy.
We'll move to the committee for questions. Who has questions? That's Blake.
I have a recommendation. I think quite simply, I think we should, as corporate scrutiny, I think we should recommend that this strategy is deferred to the new committee system. And that'd be our recommendation.
Second that.
Councillor Brody. Do you have any other further questions? Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Baker's said exactly what I would agree entirely with. I think it's appropriate that it is taken forward. I know there's been a lot of work into it. One of the minor things which have come up recently, a few of you may remember, there's been a minor court places issue. May have affected a few people. But basically, what I don't see in the strategy is the way that that might go forward. And I wonder whether the strategy needs to have slightly more material, what is going to be put in to make that happen. It's you could if you read it very carefully, obviously it's there underneath, but I think it needs to be more explicit so that we actually have a strategy which is concerned about the school place issue.
I think one of the things that's being raised by the committee, is it not that everything has been intrinsically linked? You know, it's very clear that whatever happens, yeah, actually, I think it's really important. We'll bring Councillor Bacon in.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose the question I wanted to ask has been alluded to by Councillor Stewart, but I was going to ask this: given that aligning school places with the numbers of pupils has been described as vital to the education strategy, I wanted to ask if the Cabinet decisions of the 20th March have therefore undermined the strategy, or at least adversely affected the ability to pursue some of its aims, particularly the improvement of school standards.
That's basically what I was going to say, but more coherently. So thank you for writing.
You don't say it more coherently than me.
You said it more coherently. Definitely. I was trying to get the words in the right way, but you know, that was exactly what I was saying. Thank you, Councillor Bacon, for saying that. I think that's the feeling of the committee. Because I didn't want to just refer something to a committee system without a good reason. And I think ultimately that has been the discussion, and I've seen emails that referring to that as well, that, you know, how can we move forward with this strategy when actually only closing 2 of those schools, when we know actually it is going back on the table that the whole system and the schools will have to be looked at. There is no doubt by anybody on this committee that actually 2 schools were closed, but more schools have to be. You know, that's the bit that is going back to the committee system to discuss. And if that's going back to the committee system to discuss, this does actually put this in a very difficult position for anybody to pass this strategy as is. That would be the feeling, I think, of this committee, wouldn't it? Are you, Councillor Brodie?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key element of the strategy is to have a sustainable school system. We haven't got one now. There is no prospect of that as it stands until we know, and we've had advice from Mr. Whitaker and his team as to the way forward, and that's going to start to happen at the first Children's Services Committee under the new system, which probably won't meet until early June. I mean, we're in a total mess, aren't we? To be frank, and let's face it, 2 schools are closing on 31st of August, but all the rest, the 37 or whatever, are all at risk, including the ones that think they were saved.
It's correct, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
So just a couple of things, just on the point about the detail. So with most of these, well, with some of these pillars, there are underlying action plans as well that exist. So this is more of an overarching holistic strategy. So for example, with regard to school place planning, there is the school place planning strategy, which also went to Cabinet last July and sits underneath this. Yes, it will need to be updated, as most local authorities would update that on an annual basis to take account of then changes in numbers of schools or public admission numbers, but also numbers of children. So that will be an evolving document which gets updated every year anyway and sits underneath this. In the same way that regarding the pillar around special educational needs, we have now a draft special educational needs and disabilities transformation plan, which we jointly own with the Integrated Care Board. So that just dealing with that underlying bit. Just so we're clear about the 2 schools which you referred to, so Cowes and Arreton, I think everyone's aware that there has been a referral to the schools adjudicator relating to Arreton, and we are waiting for the schools adjudicator to opine on that. We don't yet know when that will happen.
Okay, thank you. Wendy Pereira.
2 points from me, really. One in relation to the schools being back on the table. If you remember when we had the vote at corporate scrutiny, when you made your recommendations to cabinet, we made that very explicitly part of your understanding in terms of the recommendation you put forward. So yes, they are on the table. I guess my question around the strategy is, and it's a bit of clarity, really. I'm not hearing you say that the strategy is wrong to aim for a strategy for a sustainable school system. It's more the assurance that there is a pathway to get to that, given where we now are.
Yes.
So in terms of deferring it, is it about the strategy itself, or is it about how we implement the strategy that's the issue? Because is there something that says as a strategy it's not wrong, but how it can be implemented is the bit that maybe needs to be reflected in the strategy?
You know what? If he doesn't mind, I'd like to bring in Councillor Bacon again. I can. It's my committee. I can do what I like. Councillor Bacon.
Councillor Bacon was typing an email and would appreciate if you could repeat the question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So the question was. Sorry, it's really on my back to
Yeah,
you.
Councillor Bacon, come and sit at the table. Come and join us.
Yes. The question is around whether the feeling is that as a strategy, it needs more work, or whether it's how you implement the strategy given recent decisions that needs to be articulated.
It's the how. Councillor Bacon, what was your feeling on it?
It's, you know, I was going to say it's a chicken and egg situation, but it's not. I mean, obviously, I was the cabinet member when the education strategy, the concepts and the initial development took place. And that was happening alongside place planning to some extent hand in hand. And as I referred in my question, the place planning process has always been seen as a vital, well, to me when I was in post, been seen as a vital element of what needed to happen. So without that, it's difficult to my mind to see how a number of elements of the education strategy can go forward. So it's almost that the place planning strategy was an assumed element of the education strategy, and perhaps it should be incorporated into it, although, as has been referred, so I'm thinking aloud here, so I hope I'm making some sense. As has been said, a place planning strategy was adopted by Cabinet some time ago, and sits there to be now updated, obviously, to take account of changing situations. It's a very difficult question, actually, to come. It's not an off-the-cuff answer one could give. I feel that the two documents have sort of been sat alongside, so perhaps they should be become more intertwined if it is now accepted. I hope it is that place planning is essential to be able to undertake some of those key steps and achieve some of those key aims in the education strategy. So perhaps the previous document, once updated on place planning, needs to be incorporated, not just as an appendix, but as a core element of the education strategy. Both need work now to deal with the worsening situation in education, which we now have.
Councillor Brodie.
Yes. This, as I see it, we need to have an education strategy in place. And a lot of time has been spent on this. You both, Mr. Whitaker and his team over the last 15 months and with Councillor Bacon for most of the last 15 months. An element of that is to produce is to have a sustainable school system, which we failed at so far. But I don't think that obviates the need for the fact that we need a strategy that can then be amended, altered, or whatever is determined through the committee system that starts in late May, early June. So, I mean, in my view, I mean, having read the education strategy, I mean, I'm comfortable with it as it stands, but I also recognise that there's no sustainable school system at the moment, and there isn't going to be until we address that. So, I mean, what my inclination would be is that we would recommend the adoption of the education strategy by the last cabinet in 2 days' time, but also stress our concern that a fundamental strand of this strategy, a sustainable school system, has been failed by the cabinet of its meeting on the 18th of March or whatever date it was, and that needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency by this council and through its Children's Services Committee. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Councillor Jarman.
I hear what you say, Jeff. I think it's very difficult, as Councillor Bacon said, to look at these things in isolation. And unless we understand what the end game is in terms of sustainability, I'm not just talking about individual numbers, but geography comes very hard into that. Funding issues come very hard into that. I think the number of stakeholders, including those who perhaps in the past have been more excluded from it, needs to come more into it. So I think it's very difficult to say this is the right strategy until we understand the fullness of that other side of school-based planning as a proposition. So I would prefer to hold this back, wait until we have a chance to look at things more in the round. But I do understand the need to move forward with increasing haste, because the longer we don't have these school-based planning as an operative mechanism to deliver and a timescale for it, and a policy that sits behind it, the more problems we are causing both ourselves and the schools and the teachers and the parents and the pupils, because all of them are in a state of flux and doubt at the moment. And it's us as a council who have left them in that situation.
Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. I think I think Jeff, Councillor Cody, actually crystallised what was forming in my head. I think it would be unwise to just park the education strategy and say it'll come along later. If one goes back through the history of this, one of the things that happened when this council became its own children's services department again was to think we need our strategy, how we're going to go forward, and an education strategy is a key part of that. And I think looking back even further, one of the perceived problems with the previous place planning process when we were still part of Hampshire in that regard was that it was seen as being done not within the context of an overarching strategy. And the sense of it was perhaps not as clear as it should have been. So I would align myself with the comments made by Councillor Brodie. Obviously not a member of the committee. Thank you for letting me speak. But having been involved with
I am fully aware, having been a cabinet member for 4 years, that it takes, you learn your area of field. It's not something that you learn overnight. It isn't possible, but you do actually live and breathe it. I still could tell you so much about adult social care, and I really can be quite boring about it, apparently, especially when I've had a couple of glasses of wine. But it's one of those things that, your experience and knowledge is valued at this committee, and your input is appreciated. Councillor Brake, it was your recommendation. Are we taking on board what this committee is saying? I think one of the questions we need to ask is if our recommendation is as Councillor Brodie is saying it, that we do need a strategy in place, but it needs to go to the committee system to be looked at, considering the situation we are now in, and how much of that can this be one of the agendaed items that goes straight to the committee system to make sure it's already on the committee system to be worked in as part of that whole parcel. So it means that if cabinet passes this, it literally will only be, it will be a strategy in place with the knowledge that it's going straight to committee system to be amended to work in with what is happening, that we don't have a sustainable school system at the moment.
So we had sort of similar situation for the last corporate scrutiny where we had is it better to have no policy or an incorrect
Domestic violence policy strategy.
I think of this I would actually argue that where the new committee has got to sort of go into this with a fine tooth comb, that it's meaningless accepting a strategy as is, because it's going to have to be rewritten. So I would step ones and say that we recommend that it gets pushed entirely to the new system.
That's just true.
I have to agree. I don't think the strategy at the moment stands up. It looks and reads really well. It all sounds logical, but it falls apart on contact with reality. That is what's happened to this. In its existing form, I do not think that it is fit for purpose without including place planning as a key part of that strategy.
Should we?
Councillor Drew.
I was just going to ask if Mr. Whittaker could maybe elucidate what would be the harm in terms of delay, in terms of presumably a lack of practical programs which would otherwise be implemented. Is that what we're saying? If we were to sit on this awaiting further ventilation by committee system, what are the sort of the things that you're waiting to implement, but this would be a roadblock if we don't adopt?
So there's a lot of ongoing activity which has been on for quite a long time that underpins this. So I guess if I refer back to my comments about the school-based planning, there is a school-based planning strategy which sits underneath this. This is the overarching holistic approach. And so I guess the thing that might be hindered by not adopting this and going forward is that the council is only one player in this approach to improving outcomes for all children and young people on the island. So early years providers, schools, colleges. Of course, one of the pillars is all around the curriculum, including pathways into adulthood, where we want to work more closely with organisations, for example, like the Chamber of Commerce. And I think one of the benefits of one of these overarching strategies is it creates a clear vision that people from different organisations who are coming to this from slightly different angles can all get behind something and work together on our shared objectives for improving outcomes for all children. And I think that would be the thing which was delayed by not adopting this strategy. It's that ability to bring people together behind a shared vision and work together on something across different organisations. There's lots of work which is happening anyway. So for example, the pillar around workforce, we're doing lots of work. In fact, last week I was delighted we appointed 3 more members into our special educational needs and disabilities statutory team, where we've had some gaps, and we're rolling out a whole programme around improving the support and training for them around the legal, the statutory requirements around that whole EHCP process, and the like. So that sort of work will carry on anyway within different organisations. But the thing I think which would be hindered with bringing the whole island community together, it's really that whole island community we need, the voluntary sector and everyone getting behind this in the shared best interests of children and young people.
Anybody want my opinion on it?
You didn't put your hand up, yeah? Well, if you, no, sorry, hold on, Councillor Critchson. I'm really sorry, but you have sat there really quietly.
Up twice, my hands.
You need to put it up high because we didn't see you at all. So Councillor Bacon, put your hand up and then we'll refer to yourself. Thank you, Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. Just following on from what Mr. Whittaker said, I think it should be noted that this document has always been regarded as an organic document. It's been a draft in existence, but a firm point of reference for some considerable time as work of the Education Department has been developing over the last year. To be blunt, I think too much has been kicked down the road already, and we've got to start somewhere. So for my part, from whatever position of authority or standing I have now, I would think that the best thing would be adopt the strategy, but as has been said, it's already to be referred to the relevant committee, and the work to develop and work out how it should be put into place, how it should be given more detail, more teeth, whatever, takes place. But you need something to start working on rather than just wiping the canvas again.
Which is sort of the view that we took on the domestic violence strategy as a committee, that it wasn't fit for purpose, but actually it needed more work, but we needed something in place. Councillor Richardson.
Agreeing with Councillor Bacon and wanted to, the education children's service team have worked really hard on this, and this was out last summer, and they've been taking elements of that and putting it into place already. And I think we all knew that the school place planning element was fluid and that it would need to be readdressed at some point. Whatever decisions were made at the last round of proposals, that would need to be built on. So this was always going to build on that. That wasn't going to solve all our problems and numbers at that point. So I don't think hanging the decision on that to defer it, because that was always going to have to be relooked at. But place planning proposals are going to keep being developed, and the committee system will need to take that on and decide how to best to progress that. So I think, say thanks to the team for putting this together. The schools improvement team are hitting the ground running and using a lot of the elements of this to get going and make those changes in schools that we need. So I think you take on this proposal at this stage.
Wendy Prora.
You do have a proposal that Councillor Blake has put on the table and it's been seconded, so not forgetting the fact that you, as a committee, you're going to have to deal with that. I think there is a route to say that as an overarching strategy, it sets the scene for the committee work, and it's not unreasonable to think of this as being, particularly when you look at Pillar 5, a sustainable education infrastructure, the first question the Children's and Education Committee could have in front of itself at the first committee would be in relation to the element about sufficiency of primary and secondary places. What are the key issues and how are we going to address getting to a sustainable education infrastructure?
I get that, and I need to remind the committee we are not a decision-making committee. We are just making a recommendation to Cabinet, who will be making the decision if this strategy. So I need to. So the original proposal on the table needs to be voted on. That's correct, Councillor Brodie, isn't it? But I do have an alternative proposal, which my proposal would be, is that this committee recognises that there is further work that needs to be and is accepted, because I think that's accepted by both Mr Whitaker and yourselves, isn't it, that there is work that needs to be done on this because of the changing situation within education, that this needs to be moved straight to a strategy is passed, so we have a strategy, but further work needs to be carried out on it, so it needs to be one of the first items that is referred to the new committee system, would be my recommendation. So if we voted on Councillor Blake.
Entirely, Chair. I think Councillor Bacon said was my argument for me, so we came to a different conclusion. But this is, this is a draft organic document that is kind of used. However, he says it's been kicked down the cans are kicked down the road. Well, we all know the reason why that is. And that's not the fault of the strategy. The strategy being approved means that we are happy that this is a complete document, which we're not. I'm not.
No, it isn't, because this committee recommended with lots of strategies. I think we have to accept lots of strategies are organic documents. So it is no different to our suicide prevention document, is an ever movable document that is always being.
But we're happy with it at the time it exists. We are happy that it may alter its appearance through time. We're happy with the way it exists at the time. And I think actually I made a mistake last time of voting for the recommendation put to court scrutiny. On reflection, I would have voted against that. That domestic abuse strategy was incorrect. It shouldn't have been approved. So, well, I know, in the recommendation, I voted against that last time. So I'm saying this time I'm going to have the courage and conviction to say, actually, no, this is wrong. It's not complete. Yes, it's organic, but at the moment it's not right. So therefore, let's make it right through the committee system.
Let's move to a vote. I think that's the easiest thing to do. We sat here all evening. So Councillor Brake, your proposal was there, Councillor Blake, seconded by Councillor Brodie. Did you want to repeat your recommendation was?
Defer it so that this approval strategy
to the committee system. We'll move to the vote on that. So, Councillor Brodie, can you put your hands up? Who is going to vote to move it to the committee system? 1, 2, 3. Okay, and my proposal is that we recommend.
Yeah, vote against that.
We vote against it. Vote against it. So vote against that. Sorry, Councillor Blake, you can shoot me now. And then we'll move to my proposal that we recommend. Our recommendation to Cabinet is that they move forward with the strategy, that we have a strategy in place, but it is referred straight to the committee system on the understanding that there is further work needs to do it with our current unsustainable school system. That's my recommend. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, we'll move to the vote on that. 1, 2, 3. So that passes. That's our recommendation. Okay. Expansion of special educational needs provision. Mr. Whittaker.
Thank you again. So this report relates to one of the pillars from the education strategy, and it relates specifically to expanding the number of specialist education places we have on the island. So a bit of background, the majority of children who have special education needs and disabilities will always be educated in mainstream schools. Some, though, will need a specialist placement for their needs to be met. And most of the time, those are children who have an education healthcare plan in place. Now, I think it's fairly well understood that on the island, there is a shortage of specialist places. In the report, you can see a summary of the specialist places that exist at the moment in paragraph 18. And so it lists there what we have. We have specialist resource provisions, which are places in mainstream schools where children with special education needs and disabilities are based, but they are able to have a mixed experience of some time in mainstream school and sometime in a smaller and more controlled environment. And you can see what we have at the moment, and you can see that the proposals to expand a certain number of those places. You can also see the breakdown between primary and secondary, and then you can also see the fact that we're proposing the expansion of both our special schools on the island. That's Medina House School, which is the primary special school, and St George's, which is the secondary special school. Now, the council has a statutory duty to make sure that all children have an appropriate place. And at the moment, we are not, in all cases, meeting our statutory duties around making sure that we have appropriate education provision. That, referring back to earlier comments about what some families have fed back to us about their needs being met, their children's needs being met in school. We also have a relatively high number of packages which are called educated other than at school packages, so EOTAS packages. And through this expansion, we will be able to better meet our statutory duties and improve the quality of education experience that these children have. You can see that we are looking to reuse buildings that otherwise wouldn't be actively used for education provision. So we're looking to do that where possible. And anticipating Councillor Drew's question about the impact of not proceeding with this, the recommendation is about moving to a consultation on these proposals. This is a statutory consultation, so that this increased provision can be brought into reality in September at the start of the next academic year. So in terms of timeliness, this is why this is critical timing, because the proposal is to go to a consultation on the 2nd of May, so that we can go through that consultation and then, depending on that, still be able to make a decision to go ahead with implementing these expansions from the start of the new academic year. I'll be happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Critchin, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I'm just, obviously this report does go some way to meet the needs of our sort of changing landscape of educational needs, and that's, so I think that we've got to take on board those 7 expansions and realise the need in the community, and that hope that this will go some way to address that. Importance.
Questions from the committee, please. Councillor Brodie.
Yes, Jack. Just a point of fact first, Mr. Whitaker, on recommendation 6 regarding St George's School. It describes an increase of places from 208 to 228, which is 20. And then it says with 40 places being provided at the satellite site located in East Cowes. Does that mean you're transferring 20 existing pupils from St George's to East Cowes?
I have to check the numbers on that. So we already have, I think we already have 20 places at the studio site in East Cowes. So that would be an increase of the studio site to 40.
Right, I see. Okay. It didn't make sense to me.
It could have been clearer, couldn't it, actually? Thank you.
And then just in terms of the points, I mean, I'm aware, I mean, I was consulted as the local member a year ago about the increase in places at Medina House School, which I have no problem with, apart from the various traffic issues that are significant in my ward relating to Medina House School, and I wish it was somewhere else, frankly, than in a very tight urban area. I have no problem with the changes to St George's School. I have no problem with the changes to mysterious Lionheart School, which I had to find out what that was recently, because nobody ever tells, backbench members like me. It's all secret to cabinet members and things like that. But I understand it's the place that used to be Honeyhill Primary up the road. I've got no problems with any of them, but I don't understand.
Sorry, Councillor Andre.
Sorry, I apologise, Chair.
It's really hard to chair a meeting when you're sat there muttering and adding bits in, so please. Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you. What I don't understand is the 4 other recommendations regarding mainstream primary schools, which do have some provision for SEN, where you're proposing increasing the numbers there, when we've already acknowledged only quarter of an hour ago that every mainstream primary school is currently at risk of closure. In fact, one of the ones listed there was on the recent list and wasn't closed by the Cabinet decision on the 18th of March, Brading Primary. Is it not a bit silly to be increasing the numbers at those schools when they're all at risk and could be closed in probably 2 years' time now, since it can't be achieved in a year? Thank you.
So I think it's a pragmatic approach, actually, because these children need school places now. And on the basis that all schools may be in consideration for future changes, if we were to adopt that approach, we wouldn't be able to make any decisions around how we meet the needs of these children now. And so you'll see in the paper that there is an element of investment required in some cases in terms of physical infrastructure. So you're right. that if there were decisions in these schools, they won't have a long-term future. We could look back on it and actually say, well, that could have been invested somewhere else. But I guess it's chicken and egg, because these are children who exist now, who will have their needs better met by these expansions. And because we don't, all schools are kind of back in terms of consideration. If we were to adopt that approach, we wouldn't be able to make the improvements we need to better deliver our statutory duties around children with special educational needs.
It's not insignificant, but it's a very small number. There are 135 extra places in these recommendations, of which 110 are related to existing special schools. So you're talking about 25 places across 4 schools. Do we really need to do that with the potential of creating massive uncertainty over the next 2 years? A lot of parents have already had sufficient uncertainty, surely, but they've now got more thanks to the cabinet decision. All this uncertainty over the next 2 years, the potential for some of these schools to then be closed in 2 years' time, isn't it just representative again of the chaos that we're in terms of school places? Thank you.
You don't have to answer that.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he does. It's a legitimate question of a chief officer.
So, as I said in the answer to the previous question, I think we need to be pragmatic about it, because these children are already at school somewhere, and we need to make changes to improve the quality of provision that they are receiving. These are the schools that we've identified are the optimal ones to expand these specialist provisions in order to do that.
One of the things that I'll just jump in for Councillor Lever, sorry, just to say that one of my issues had always been, having visited Brading Primary School, I think, we're looking here, from 8 places to 12 places, but actually the provision at Brading is actually one that the children that have been there have settled very well at Brading, and they have been moved quite a few times in the past. So that was always my issue with Brading when I went there, that, the provision that is there now, it is meeting some very specialist needs for children who haven't been happy and content anywhere else. And I think it brings us back to that situation we were talking about, home education, that children who have specialist needs that aren't being met, if they are being met, don't upset the apple cart and move them from somewhere that is working for them. So I think one of the things that would have to be discussed, maybe one of the things that Cabinet meeting need to make sure they make very clear before they make any decision on Thursday, is what provision is going to be in place to actually secure those children. It is coming out of what Councillor Brodie is saying, is if you are going to increase this specialist needs within these schools, what level of protection are you going to give to those children? Because if you have a special educational need and you are settled, the worst thing you can do to a child who is neurodiverse is say to him, we're just about to move you and we're just about to unsettle you. So I think that decision needs to be made very clear on Thursday as part of that cabinet discussion on, if you're going to do this, what protection are you going to put in place? Because we know that these schools have got to go back on the table. That was always my strong point about Brading, that my fear that having been there and seeing very content children who had been very unhappy at lots of other schools were very settled there. That's why it didn't sit well with me at all with just that school. Mr. Whitaker, and then I'm going to bring Councillor Lieber, Councillor Jarman. Thank you.
So excuse me, this proposal is to go to consultation.
Yes.
Proposals is not.
There's a deadline. There is a deadline of May that this has to go out to consultation.
The proposal is to go to consultation on the 2nd of May.
2nd of May.
Yeah. That would be a formal statutory consultation.
And I think that's really important that the committee note that is a consultation. So this is actually a recommendation for this to go to consultation. Can I bring in Councillor Lever first, because he's been so patient?
Just adding.
Yeah,
that,
thank
just to
you.
make the point that the decision then on what happens will be within the gifted committee because they will be hearing the
Yes.
results of the consultation. So the questions that Councillor Brodie has asked are the sorts of issues that I anticipate will come out during the consultation, but it's something for to
Yes,
already be
yeah.
potentially aware of.
That makes it very different to the previous, because that was a strategy. This is actually basically agreeing that Cabinet can send this off to consultation by the 2nd of May. Councillor Lever.
Chair, just so I'm clear, and apologies if it's in the report, but I've just missed it. Is the idea with this increase in provision that we would be accommodating children within a mainstream setting that need this, that don't currently have it, or are we looking to crawl back some of the home educated children that you referred to earlier, Mr. Whitaker, and trying to get them back into a mainstream setting?
It's so there are so it is not aimed at anything specifically to do with children who are currently electively home educated. It's not to do with that. We have a number of children in a number of different schools who are currently in mainstream provision, where we believe that their needs are not currently being met, and they therefore need some kind of specialist provision. And so this expanded provision would be able to meet their needs better. So they would currently be in mainstream school, but for example, the senior leaders in those schools would be saying to the local authority, we're not able to meet their needs, we're not able to meet the provision as stated within the education and healthcare plan and the like, but we would be able to do, or a specialist resource provision within the mainstream context would be able to do that. There are also some children who are not attending school on a full-time basis because schools are not able to meet their needs throughout the school day. So there are a number of children who are on the timetables, for example, and we would be able to better meet their needs and deliver to them a fuller, richer, longer school day on a more regular basis as well. So it's a combination of different circumstances.
Councillor Jarman and Councillor Blake.
I have a few little micro questions, which I'll ask one after the other here, if I may. The first one is, would this plan accommodate all of the current SEND need that we've identified on the island?
No.
Right. With the growing need for SEND, which we already have a considerable backlog, would it help accelerate the attention and the classification or analysis that we do to those children awaiting SEND evaluations? Would it give us more capacity to deal with the backlog of those children awaiting SEND requirements analysis? I'll put it that way.
I don't think that would be a primary reason to do it. No.
Different team and a very different. Right. Would it be possible, if it goes to a consultation, to caveat the consultation with sufficient language so that we were not creating a false hope for the schools who we were proposing to move SEND children to, that it was in any way an indication of their long-term positioning there?
It's within our gift, isn't it?
Yeah. So yes.
Yeah.
I like yes and no's. You started off.
No, chief officers do.
So on that basis, given that we know it doesn't accommodate all of the SEND need that we have, but only some of it, is it possible to include that caveat, but also to give some indication of what further measures would inevitably be required to meet that SEND need and indeed our obligation? Doing small increments here.
So, I think there's two parts to the answer to that. So there will always be some children who always need a specialist place for their needs to be met. There are a number of children, for example, who currently cannot have their needs met on the island, so they have to travel to the mainland. Their needs to be met. We would be able to quantify the difference between the impact of these expansions and what we felt would be the extra number of places we needed for those sorts of children who would always going to need a specialist place. However, the second part to the answer is that there are a significant number of children who, so our aspiration is that as we raise the quality of education across all mainstream schools, there are some children who currently cannot have their needs met in mainstream, who will be able to have their needs met in mainstream when the quality of education provision is on average better than it currently is now. So, for example, if you went around all the mainstream schools now, there's some brilliant practice that goes on, and you could go into a school and there will be a child there in mainstream, may not even have an education and healthcare plan, and they're having their needs met really, really well because the staff are well trained and they're confident in identifying need and putting the supporting interventions in that child needs. You could go into another school and identify a child in the same circumstances where the school were not able to meet their needs, where the need had escalated, and maybe they're in the waiting list waiting for an education and healthcare plan. Now, those children, if their needs escalate to a certain extent, may need a specialist place. But our ambition through the education strategy is to raise the quality of practice in all island schools so that needs escalate less, and actually less children need a specialist place and more children can have their needs met within a mainstream setting, whether that be with or without an education and healthcare plan. So that is why it's not an exact science to say this is exactly how many specialist places we need, because actually we'd like that number to be as low as possible, because the higher quality your provision is in mainstream schools, the less specialist places you need. And actually on the island, there's a correlation between the quality of education outcomes and the quality of inclusive practice within mainstream schools and the escalation of need and the numbers of education and healthcare plan education healthcare needs assessments we get. So it's another example of how it's all linked.
So I think, Chair, I'd like to propose that if we go forward with this with a recommendation that Cabinet approve going forwards for this consultation, that provided that explanation of the roadmap, which actually is just very carefully articulated, and with the caveat that expectations are not unduly set in stone, then I think that would be, I'll propose that as a motion.
And I think I'd be inclined to agree with that, because actually what we need to do is have the information. We don't want to delay any information that will be used at a committee system to discuss this. That's all this is doing is recommendation, a consultation that will then go to the committee system to be discussed further. That's it, isn't it? Councillor Blake, you had a question.
I also like yes, no answers. Hopefully this one's an easy one. The statutory consultation, would that prohibit this list being added to, or is it just things you could then take away from that list in terms of provision? So say committee turned around and said, no, we don't want to put some at Brading, we want to put it at St Helens. That would prohibit that if it's not been consulted.
Correct. Yep. So it's either all or some. We couldn't then add something. We'd have to do another consultation.
But you did another consultation.
But then we would miss the timeline for the start of the academic year.
We have had a recommendation that has been seconded. So Councillor Lever, you had a question. Are you on my list? Sorry, I'm really sorry. I just looked at my list and thought I wrote his name down.
It's all right. I think it's kind of just related to what's being discussed and around my worry about creating this segregation between SEND children and non-SEND children, and actually the inadvertent negatives that may cause in the long run. In terms of the expansion provision in each of these places, I think I'm reading it correctly in the report, but is that based on identifying each of those places will offer a need that is required, or is it just about bringing a general level of places up across the estate?
So this is very targeted on specific needs and children, most of whom we know who they are.
Okay. And I guess going forward, I'd really liked the committee that will take this forward, move forward, is to look at these provisions and look at the specialist provision and look at the general provision at that same school and understand if there's a disparity. Because if the specialist provision is doing it in a way that's so different to the general provision, I think that's where you've got an issue, because really the general, I think this is what Mr. Whitaker was alluding to earlier, is the general provision should really be doing much of the same, teaching in much of the same way that the specialist provision is. So, because I think generally you're going to get a better education if that approach is taken across the whole board rather than just targeting specialists for categorised as SEND pupils. Okay.
So well, a couple of things, just so we're all clear. So so if this was to go ahead, I'll just pick one, number 3, or braiding. So braiding, the children, if there were new children attending it, they wouldn't necessarily be braiding at the moment. They might be at a different primary school, but under their education and healthcare plan, we would name it specialist resource provision at braiding. They might move from their current mainstream school to go there. So that's how it would work. But absolutely, what you're referring to there, it links to the workforce development section of the education strategy, because what we would like to do is develop expertise around supporting special education needs and disabilities, and then use those kind of leaders in the world of SEND to support our wider workforce across all schools. So if I was a mainstream school teacher, I would welcome in a colleague from a special school or a specialist resource provision who would come with me for the day and would coach me and help me understand how I can meet the needs of a particular child. And that child might then be okay in continuing mainstream provision and might not need to go into a specialist place. So that's absolutely what we need to do. We need to develop the way that we're developing all our school colleagues with this to make sure that everyone's upskilled. And this is the challenge which is being faced across the country, where there's a big shortage of specialist places. There's been very significant increase in numbers of education and healthcare plans nationally, about 10% a year for the last 7 or 8 years. And mainstream school staff, colleagues, don't necessarily have the resources and skills they need. So this is a challenge which is shared by colleagues across the country as well.
Thank you.
I also, just really quickly, the point you make about culture and inclusion within our community is a really, really important one, because we absolutely want to develop a community on the island which is very inclusive. And actually, if you talk to young people, they're very inclusive young people. Actually, you talk to children, they don't differentiate. You know, they don't find some of the needs that we have in our community now, you know, extraordinary or remarkable. It's just part of their peer group. But what we need to make sure that also exists within our wider community, the voluntary sector, so that when these children become adults, that they're accepted into the community, that our employers know how to support them, that they can go on into meaningful employment and you know, and play a valuable part in the community where they live. So that sense of community inclusion is a really, really important.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Whitaker, thank you so much for your time. You know, your passion comes across to this committee, undoubtedly. So I think we should move to the vote. I'm first, second, is that okay? So yeah, move to the vote. Okay. Recommendation of this committee. Where everyone starts packing away, you've got the excitement just discussed of the Isle of Wight local nature recovery strategy.
Really?
You excited?
Yeah. I waited, I don't know. It's been a bit out.
I would like to say that Councillor PC Wilcox has waited patiently, but she's been sat there kicking her feet, making noise and noises, and it's nearly as bad as a clicking pen. She's very lucky I haven't gone over and stabbed her in the hand with my pen. Would you like to introduce your strategy?
Well, yes, I would. I do have the fabulous James Brewer online, who is more than happy to come in and ask any technical questions that I cannot. But as you will have seen from your papers, the government, actually the previous government in 23, asked us via DEFRA to come up with these local nature recovery strategies. And I think it's a very good thing for the Isle of Wight. Putting it in basic terms, it is establishing really what and where our key habitat species are and what we can do to protect them, to better protect them. That is basically it. We were very astute that we asked ARC Biodiversity and Climate Company, who's got over 20 years experience in this, to help kickstart this and do the consultations. They did a fantastic job. I attended, I don't know how many online meetings, how many in-person meetings. Really interesting when we listened to the farmers. It was good because ARC managed to get everybody to engage. So it's just a superb piece of work. And I will just say, you know, DEFRA panel considered that the Isle of Wight NLRS had the potential to be an exemplar for the rest of the country. So, you know, it's pretty good that that we've done that. I will also say, if you do remember, that the proposed approval of the local nature recovery strategy was unanimously endorsed by Policy and Scrutiny on the 7th of March.
So
if there's any technical questions you'd like, James will answer.
My recommendation to this committee is this has been discussed at another scrutiny meeting, at Councillor Stewart's committee meeting. It has gone through scrutiny. That scrutiny recommended that strategy be passed. So I don't think we really need to move to a further in-depth discussion when this has already been discussed by Councillor Stewart's committee in full. Is everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay. So I will move to I'm wrong agenda. Members' questions.
Probably, yeah, we probably need to just recommend that we note that.
Yeah, we just recommend that we note
the
it.
Cabinet agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we should be positive about it.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It was very positive from your committee, wasn't it?
It's the best paper I've seen in years.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well done, James.
Well done, James. It's good to get a well done. That is a compliment. That is a compliment. Do we have any members' questions? Councillor Bacon's gone, so there's no members' questions. I would just like to thank you for all your time, as this is the last scrutiny meeting. Thank you for Cabinet for coming along this evening. I understand that'll be your last Cabinet on Thursday, won't it? Cabinet meeting. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the officers that have been here and given time to this committee. And thank you for my vice chair, because I think having you as vice chair, should have had you in the beginning. It's made it far more. Yeah, I think we've worked as a good team together. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Hope you have a good evening.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chair.
Well done.
Hey.
Well, they are.